As genres evolved, this one kinda just disappeared, but I do also kinda miss it even though it was a thing of its time. But most of that comes down to the depth issue. Basically, what you see is what you get, and that's not a bad thing. It does seem pretty repetitious that the game bases itself around the same 5 specific challenges over the span of 10 levels. Toy Story 2 is a movie. A movie that I am confident in stating is a movie. I kid. Toy Story 2 was actually one of my favorite and most watched movies when I was super young. Along with Aladdin and The Lion King, Toy Story 2 was one of those movies I could just watch over and over. I never was into the first all that much, probably because of all those scary as hell deformed toys they had in the second half. With that though, I never really had the chance to play all that much of Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear To The Rescue, which I'm just going to be referring to as Toy Story 2 for simplicity's sake from now on, although I did play a bit of it from time to time. I had a dentist, let's call him Dr. John, when I was super young. I'm gonna be frank, he was a horrible dentist. He would constantly botch basic procedures and perform solutions to problems in ways that my later dentist described as totally backwards. Specifics are moot because despite all that, I was always excited to go to the dentist. I know, right? Because A, it meant leaving school early, and more to the point, B, he would always have the latest video game consoles in his waiting room. Believe it or not, I was actually first exposed to Wrath of Cortex in that waiting room. I specifically remember playing Arctic Antics at one point, which in hindsight might explain why I'm so fucked up now, but one game that was available to play for a long time, I want to say 3 or 4 bi-yearly visits, was the Toy Story 2 game, and I loved it. I could never get past the first level, the boss would always wreck me, and we would always have to leave before I could get anywhere, but I loved it for how epic it felt to my 5-year-old mind. However, it would be another 12 or 13 years before I saw a copy on Craigslist, along with a copy of Twisted Metal 2 for only a few bucks, so I decided to finally conquer that old elusive chestnut that I could only ever get a taste of. So, without further ado, Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. That was unintentional, I swear. So this game was made by Traveler's Tales, who some of you may know as the developers who made all those LEGO games since like 2006. This was back when they had that one logo that had significantly more character than the overly sanitized corporate one they're currently using. Hey, remember when video game companies used to be fun? You'll have plenty of time to appreciate that fact as you're sitting through, no joke, nearly 2 minutes of company idents. Jesus Christ. Even skipping as much as you can, it's still around 30 to 40 seconds depending on how quickly you're clicking. It's just wasting time. One of them is just a splash page showing that this game is indeed rated E for everyone. As if the front of the case wasn't enough to go on. No, we need it shoved in our faces. I guess that's what you get when you make a game with as many licensed hands in it as Toy Story 2. Just look at those copyright notices. Jeez. If this video suddenly gets taken down, be sure to blame one of these guys. Especially Etch-a-Sketch. I don't like the look of those guys. Now, if you want to know the story of this game, watch Toy Story 2. I mean, I haven't watched it in years. In fact, I haven't watched any Pixar movie since that time I watched Up in grade 8 home ec. No, seriously. But I'm sure Toy Story 2 still holds up, he says with doubtful cynicism in his voice from years of nostalgia lying to him. Unlike many other movie tie-in games on the PlayStation like Harry Potter that used the framework of the story but generally is its own thing, Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear, etc. rigidly follows the plot of the film and makes 15 levels out of its major beats, even including heavily compressed clips from the movie itself. At least in this version, which is the PS1 version. Did you really expect anything less from yours truly? Honestly though, the version doesn't really matter all that much unless you want to see grainy FMVs from the movie, so really, because it's framed rigidly around the movie, this game can't really do anything to surprise you other than being a well-made, fun, exciting game, and... well, hot damn, this is probably one of the best movie tie-in games I've ever played. I know that's not much of an accomplishment. Movie tie-ins are usually rushed, hacked out garbage by subpar studios, only made to capitalize on something to squeeze a few more pennies out of a hot property, and even though movie tie-in games have been maligned for decades, the entire genre is the corpse that keeps on twitching and only seemed to finally die out for good a short while ago, at least as far as mainstream AAA releases. Even with that qualifier out of the way, Toy Story 2 still stands up on its own as a game. It came during that weird period in the 90s when games that didn't have an obvious direction to go as far as genre always ended up being this weird mix of a collectathon, a 3D platformer, and exploration game tied together with combat mechanics and a series of minigames. It's one of those weird specific genre mixes that don't really exist anymore, but also made for some rather enjoyable games for a time. As genres evolved, this one kinda just disappeared, but I do also kinda miss it even though it was a thing of its time. In any case, the basic gist gist is that there are 15 levels. 10 of those levels are open-ended levels where through various means you can collect up to 5 Pizza Planet tokens, and then every third level is a boss arena, which range from pretty good to flat-out balls. Everything you need to know is established via the obstacle course in Andy's room in the very first level. Precision shooting, platforming, combat platforming, and so on. I remember being so proud of myself when I replayed this game on an emulator in 2012 and got through this little obstacle course first try. I used to struggle with it back in the day, but to be fair, I had extremely limited time with the game, was 5 years old, and was so ham-handed I could cut them off and eat them with Christmas dinner, but whatever. It's a standard setup for a game, but what is it that Toy Story 2 does so well? I think that comes down to two things. First of all, it controls surprisingly well. To a point anyway, the camera, in keeping with the standards of the era, can still cause some issues when it's not pointing at the thing you want it to, and so you end up missing your targets, which seems to happen more when you're far up in the air and can lead to moving in slightly inaccurate ways. This game has the same active camera, passive camera thing that the Spyro games have, and I tried playing with the passive camera, and I'd sooner shove the sharpened edge of my dresser into my eye than play with the passive camera, but other than that sometimes being an issue, the controls are slick and responsive. The various different moves you can perform fit into the gameplay quite well, along with the various gimmicks that this game throws at you. You always know where you are and are never caught in a tough spot where you're not sure what to do. Even with the game's mechanics evolving as it goes on, everything fits into the controls and gameplay as established, and that brings me to the second thing this game does really well, which is variety. With each of the 5 Pizza Planet tokens you can get in every level, they use the same general template. You have to collect 5 missing things, collect 50 coins, defeat a boss, do a time-based challenge, and find 1 mystery token. While the broad strokes are always the same, they find a way to keep it fresh throughout. The biggest thing they switch up is obviously the level design. Finding 5 missing items or finding 50 coins in the first few levels is much different than, say, doing it in the construction yard, elevator hop, or even Al's Toy Barn. All the levels are so different and utilize such different mechanics that they all feel utterly unique to play. I think when people talk about variety in games, they tend to talk about variety in game design, but something as simple as building a level vertically or building it around a specific mechanic can make all the difference. And the exploration is actually really rewarding when you have one of those aha moments and find a secret area with a new collectible that you had no idea was there. Like, I had no idea there was a hidden area on the opposite side of this river or just past this barricade, but the levels are very busy. They're so dense and bursting with bits of personality that they're really fun to explore, and they're always introducing new gimmicks for you to traverse, so exploring and finding these collectibles is always fun. Then there are the 10 level bosses. For better or worse, each boss is unique. There's some that are really straightforward, like the aforementioned level 1 Tin Man boss, who all told, you just need to wait for him to let his guard down and then you strike. Then you have the likes of the Zurg Kite, who's on top of a small platform on a big tree. One false move and you're all the way at the bottom again. Not kidding. Still not the biggest drop in the game. Even levels where you wouldn't expect there to be a boss fight, you have one, like Al's Penthouse, where you have to fight the gunslinger in this really tiny arena off the beaten path, or you have this jackhammer at the top of the construction yard and you're confined to the grid of this incomplete building. He's chasing you, and the only thing that can harm him is the disc launcher power pack. Every level has subtle differences in how the bosses are fought, and sometimes just finding these bosses can be half the fun, like having to go all the way to the top of alleys and gullies before fighting the boss. Furthermore, that doesn't even take into account the 5 sectioned off boss levels, which aren't as good, but hold that thought. Then you have the timed challenges. Now, in some of these levels, they can be pretty lame, like in the alleys and gullies level, where you just need to grab 5 bones over a small river within a certain time limit, and the one in the construction yard is even worse. You barely need to go anywhere, it's basically the gimme of level collectibles. But games like races are fun, especially the one where you have to race this spaceship-looking thing down several aisles using zip lines, and you have to get the timing just right, because one slight fuck-up could cost you the very narrow margin for error you have, and if you touch the ground, game over. Not actually. Or how about the one where you have to race a Pizza Planet token down the air vent in elevator hop, dodging traps and keeping pace with it all the way to the bottom, though you don't just get it when you get to the bottom, you still need to grab it before it disappears. I'm sure that earned the ire of many children over the years, and the final of these 5 reoccurring challenges is the most exciting because it's considered the mystery challenge. Sometimes you just need to find the Pizza Planet token in the level. If it sounds like I'm being dismissive, I'm really not. This usually makes for the toughest sequence in any given level, even as far back as the first level and as late as airport infiltration. infiltration. Though the pole jumping physics in the latter level was giving me some trouble, and the timing on that teeter-totter wing thing was a bit hard to gauge. Then when they're not hidden in the environment, they're locked behind these neat environmental minigames, like this one where you have to match the pattern of lights to make a helicopter land, or you have to fill a paint can with 3 different combinations of colors. Things that may sound about as thrilling as Sunday tea with grandma, but are a nice change of pace from the frenetic, almost chaotic tone the rest of the game has. I mean, look at this. Look at all these destructive toys. They only pretend to not be alive when there are humans around, right? Well, the toys are everywhere, and I don't see no humans around. The toys have seemingly been allowed to run wild on the world unopposed as far as this game is concerned. Perhaps this is the alternate universe Toy Story where the humans are all gone and the toys have all been left to roam free looking for masters that won't come home. Or perhaps, because there's just a discordant amount of samey looking offensive robots, maybe these robot dudes took over the world and killed all who opposed them. Maybe the reality this game takes place in is more akin to the Buzz Lightyear game that Rex was playing instead of the movie. Perhaps the subtitle of Buzz Lightyear To The Rescue has more meaning than we thought. Or maybe this is actually a crossover with Mega Man and Dr. Wily's scheme for mass production of apocalyptic robots. Fun, fun, fun! The enemies in question don't start out too exciting. They start out as these boxy robots that are dealt with easily enough, but then they introduce these Roomba-looking robots or these giant robot dudes that look like Doomsday fused with the Yellow Devil. Yeah, just give them a good ol' spin and that should do the trick. That's the thing, no matter how tough an enemy looks, you only really have 2 attacks, a laser and a spin, so if one doesn't work, use the other. If neither works, try charging them. In fact, the only reason you shouldn't be using a fully charged attack is either due to time restraints or Buzz being stunned after a fully charged spin attack, which can leave you open. There's a rare occasion where none of this will work and you'll have to find a laser power-up around the level, but this is a rare case. They may make you use different means once or twice to beat some enemies, but that's usually down to specific level design choices, like having an enemy only weak to spinning occupy a small platform, in which case you'd be inclined to find a power-up. I will say that death is handled interestingly in this game. On one hand, you don't lose any progress, but on the other hand, you don't lose any progress. You spawn right where you died, enemies and hazards still all around you. So I'm glad it doesn't set you back, but this goes too far. It puts you right back in the line of fire. I've gone over all the major collectibles, but if I'm being honest, it does seem pretty repetitious that the game bases itself around the same 5 specific challenges over the span of 10 levels. Well, there are many ways that this game stays fresh throughout and expands the base mechanics to add depth while being able to stick to the one specific form of gameplay that it does. One way it does this is that they introduce these various power-ups, or power packs if you will, to evolve the basic gameplay, and the way that power pack is spelled makes me feel like there's gonna be some jacked British dude that's gonna jump out of my TV and kick me so hard my face resembles the letter C. It starts out basic. You'll get a shield for getting through hostile areas unhurt, but then you'll get rocket-powered shoes, hover boots, or my personal favorite, the Grappling Hook. The Grappling Hook makes for some of the best levels in the entire game, particularly the alleys and gullies level, where the entire thing is just a series of grappling points going up for ages, and you have to traverse the hostile alleyway and platform all the way to the top. One mistake will cost you everything, but making it all the way to the top, collecting everything along the way, is the most satisfying feeling as you look down upon the puny mortals on the ground. Mere ants to you and your ivory tower. While it's not the same because it employs more traditional platforming elements like poles and bouncy platforms, the airport infiltration level gave me a similar feeling because there's so much verticality to the design, and trial and erroring your way all the way to the top is great. The best level in that regard is easily the elevator hop level, which is the level where we get ourselves to Al's penthouse. It's the most vertical of all the levels. The best way I can describe it is, if anybody's ever read the Wayside books, it's basically like that. I'm down. The whole elevator shaft thing they got going makes for some fun and unique challenges, most of which are just climbing the thing. Thanks to its unique layout, the ability to traverse the level isn't as simple as walking around, so it's been flipped on its head, and I love the way they handle shortcuts. I can't get enough of that. Hell, even just the basic platforming sequences in this game are great, and you have tons of them. One that immediately sticks out is in Al's penthouse, which is a level I really underestimated because I thought it looked a bit small. No, actually, the fact that it's considered a glorified apartment makes me wonder what a house in this universe looks like. In fact, I think this is bigger than Andy's house. Step it up, Andy's mom. You're being outdone by a fat, balding incel working a dead-end job. I bet he plays World of Warcraft, is horribly addicted to lolly hentai, and goes off on internet forums about how feminism is a lie. I kid, obviously. Owning a toy store in a major metropolitan area is far from a dead-end job. Anyways, you have to use a reoccurring set piece of 3 sponges to travel across while the water rises. It's a creative spot and is fun to traverse unless the ledge grabbing mechanic is having one of its off days and doesn't register. As far as other sequences that really stand out, you have one section in Al's Spaceland where you're getting shot on the ground from all sides, and you have to stay as high as possible while dealing with other enemies and these poles for Buzz to practice his gymnastics. The final proper level on the tarmac might seem a bit intimidating due to its size, and while it's true that any level that has to use a speed power-up just to help you get around needs to rethink what it's doing with its life, once you figure out that one of the primary means to get around the level is riding the plane around the tarmac, it's a great level with a great number of set pieces, though that challenge where you have to get out of the center area without touching the edges or jumping could use slightly better controls than what this game has, but you can still get it within 2 or 3 tries if you're any good, and if you've made it this far, you should be. Or the sequence of getting to the top of the construction yard while fire and brimstone rains upon you is really fun and creative, and in keeping with the game's relatively merciful difficulty, there's even a switch you can hit at every level of the structure to raise a platform for easy access. Or another favorite would be Al's Toy Barn again, where you have to do this timed sequence twice, first for one of the 5 chicks, and then again with significantly less time for a token. Oh, you think you're good? Well, let's see you dance, big boy. Metaphorically, that is. I literally wouldn't dance if my life depended on it. And that's only happened once, and I managed to defuse that situation by cleverly utilizing a toilet brush. So exploring many of these levels and the tactics to do so makes things like recovering the 5 missing items for each level feel subtly different, so the game can remain fresh throughout its runtime. The thing is, there's a total of 50 collectibles in the game, and to access the final boss, you need at least 40 of these collectibles, and you can't move on to the next level unless you've collected at least 1 Pizza Planet token in the current level, so there's not a lot of room for error. You need to be collecting at least 4 Pizza Planet tokens on average per level, which may sound like a task, but if I'm being honest, this game isn't actually that hard. You're set forth in these levels, and by the time you get to level 4, maybe, you'll have caught on to exactly what each one of these levels asks of you. And if you're stuck, Rex is somewhere out in the open in each one of these levels, and he tells you where to go and what to do, so it's a useful inbuilt hint system, which is helpful and cushions the blow if you need it. And some of these levels can be pretty intimidating to first-time players, not at the same level of, say, grunty industries from Banjo-Tooie, but it can still be pretty damn tough if you're not prepared. I think the one thing that would probably give new players the most trouble would be the Mr. Potato Head pieces. That's how you get the new power packs. You need to find some missing part of Mr. Potato Head in the level and bring it back to him, and these are universally the most obnoxious to find collectibles in the game, but I guess the aforementioned power packs are worth it. It's funny because while these power-ups are needed in some circumstances, if you're crafty, you can get through without needing them at times. In particular, there's this one race in level 2, Andy's Neighborhood, where they tell you that you need the turbo boots to win, but no. The car is corporeal in the level, it doesn't phase through you. When it runs into your ankles, it plows to a complete stop for a second, so if you make sure to overtake and then have the car bash you from behind every time it's about to overtake you, you'll stay ahead. It's pretty awkward and will probably take a few tries, but to me that's better than arbitrarily forcing backtracking. I don't like forced backtracking, and this game has enough to irk me, so it's nice to beat the system even if it's only for a bit of the game. By my count, there are 3 levels that try and pull this required backtracking bullshit, and maybe if I wasn't the type of person to compulsively make sure to 100% every level before leaving in games like this, that wouldn't be an issue, but because of that one specific personality trait, it gets on my tits. I think it comes down to the fact that you don't know you're not going to be able to finish the level until you hit that wall, so you're going to inevitably do some or even all of what you can do before the game makes it clear that you can't go any further without first finishing later parts of the game. These levels restart from square one when you come back, so all it does is ensure you're going to have to do some parts of the game over again, and repetition is never not boring. And the worst part? It's utterly arbitrary. There's no logical reason that they have to give you these power-ups after you already needed them. That's my issue with forced backtracking. Try as I might, I just couldn't do Al's Toy Barn without getting the hover boots, and that was a particularly tough pill to swallow because I needed to get the final chick. So I'd gotten 4 of the 5 level collectibles only to find out at that point I was shit out of luck. Yeah, suck a bucket of fucks through a silly straw, that's bull hockey. Though there was one other case where I completely bypassed a section of the level. You're supposed to use a balloon to float over to this rail to grab a token, but I just jumped over there and made it just fine, so I'm not sure if that was intentional or a tone-deaf oversight. Yeah, Toy Story 2 isn't exactly the most tightly designed game at times. It's never a good sign when I'm asking myself, was I supposed to do that? It's at least stable for such an open-ended game, although I have seen it absolutely crap itself. When you're making a game that's doing multiple levels of rendering and attempting to make sure everything in your view is rendered while simultaneously trying not to overload the processor, you can end up with some interesting glitches.
Where the fuck am I? Why are there no textures? Why am I in the middle of black nothingness? What the fuck happened?
Obviously that didn't happen to me. I'd just be remiss not to mention it because it's fucking hilarious. Given the hardware, this game actually does look quite good, and I'm impressed with how much it manages to render. I'm not kidding when I say it renders not just everything you can see, but also everything that you can potentially see. Unless something is behind a wall or it's not visible for you to see for whatever reason, it's rendered, although that does mean it obviously had to take some shortcuts, most notably mip-mapping. You may notice a jarring shift in resolution as you're falling from a great height, and that's the textures shifting from low quality to high quality. It's more than welcome if it means being able to see everything around you, because these environments are massive for the system, so if Toy Story 2 had a crap draw distance, that would be the hypothetical ghost pepper in the salad to kill the dish and your digestive tract. You know, they worked with what they had and made a game that looked and performs as well as it possibly could have. Honestly, if this game were deeper mechanically, had more content, and wasn't shackled to the confines of a pre-existing property, this could have easily been one of the best 5th gen games I've played, but most of that comes down to the depth issue. Basically, what you see is what you get, and that's not a bad thing, and any game where I can remember the entire thing without even needing to go back and look at the footage is no doubt a very engaging experience, but it's also very shallow. When it comes down to it, you're not really doing much. I mean, just look at how you deal with enemies. You spin or you shoot. There's not much very nuanced about this. Even with the 5 main bosses, you either spin them or shoot them. The Slime Time boss is probably the most inventive in that you need to quickly shoot him to damage him, and he slowly grows as the fight goes on, so you have to shoot him more to damage him. Not the most inventive system. Or the Zurg boss fight in the elevator shafts, whom you have to spin, but he stays in the air so he's hard to hit, and at times he hangs out over the edge of the shaft, meaning this'll happen. Hell, even the final boss is a brain-dead moment. They go as far as to have you fight 3 bosses at once, specifically the bosses of the 3 previous levels. And here's a funny story. So regardless of the game overs and whatnot, your lives carry over between levels. I came into the final boss with half a health bar and 1 extra life, so I thought I wasn't going to be able to beat it, but it turns out all I needed to do was lure each boss away from the others individually and deal with them individually until they were all done. Managed to deal with them rather swiftly, actually. Here's fun though, I had less than half a full health bar and still had Pizza Planet tokens to get, so I actually had to retroactively grind for lives in Al's penthouse, then I could get the remaining Pizza Planet tokens, and I was having enough fun that I felt compelled to get all 50. And you know what you get for getting all 50? Nothing. Lame. Yeah, I think Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue is an exemplar of the 3D platforming genre. It's not groundbreaking, but it takes a set of tried and true mechanics and strings them all together into a game that's far from deep and far from epic, but it's an engaging, mindless experience that's fun and manages to stay fresh throughout with a system of gameplay that evolves naturally and effectively. It's far from my favorite game, but as far as licensed games, I have a hard time thinking of any game that does it better than Toy Story 2. I mean, sure as fuck not GoldenEye. Oh, sorry. The N64 fans have infiltrated the compound. Alright, I gotta go hold my turf. You guys run along. There's some ice cream bars in the freezer on your way out. It's gonna be a long night. This video was brought to you in part by my lovely patrons. I thank you for your continued support. If you want to become a patron for TGX, the link is in the description.